Beautiful Karla, handsome Paul, the perfect couple. They held a fairy tale wedding as the police recovered their latest victim.
It's a tragedy of epic proportions.
They loved and laughed in public, raped and murdered in private, including her own little sister.
And they made a video of it.
Paul's in for life, but now Karla, one half of the killing machine, is being set free. Some say just to kill again.
I suspect that all we're going to be doing is setting our watches before the next victim.
They're taking over. Alligators. They're everywhere. It's the time of year when Florida's Alligator Alley really comes alive. Today on A Current Affair, meet the Gator Tamer. This hair salon gives new meaning to take a little off the top.
If you don't want to see girls in bikinis cutting hair, then don't come into Bikini Cuts and see it.
Hello and welcome to A Current Affair. I'm Tim Green. It was a story so shocking, so disturbing that the judge closed the court and banned the nation's media. The crimes were evil, and they seemed even more evil because of the apparent beauty of the couple who committed them. They looked like the perfect couple, right? But the community didn't breathe easy until these two monsters, that's what they were finally locked away. But guess what? One of those monsters is about to be let out. Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo were the picture-perfect couple, but their good looks were deceptive. Together, they raped and murdered 3 young women in a crime spree that left Canada living in fear and disbelief. Karla, one half of the killing machine, is about to walk free, and there's not a single thing the authorities can do to stop it. Reporter Alan Cairns of the Toronto Sun has been covering this story from the beginning.
The Karla Homolka story is not over. There's going to be a very dramatic ending to that story.
Carly Curls, that was her nickname, a beautiful 17-year-old blonde. She was president of her high school clique, the exclusive Diamond Club, whose members' sole ambition was to marry a rich hunk. And she did. But Paul Bernardo was also a psychopathic, sexual sadist rich hunk.
This case is so captivating because it's a tragedy of epic proportions, and it's a psychological quiz. I mean, it's a mystery.
Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo looked like Ken and Barbie, the ideal couple. But in their private world, they were joined together by unspeakable crimes. And their first victim? Karla's own little sister, 15-year-old Tammy.
Paul had this fixation on virgins. He always held it against Karla that she wasn't a virgin.
Author Stephen Williams has written 2 books about this extraordinary case.
He expressed to her his desire to have sex with her sister, and she said, "Oh, all right, dear, well, let's figure out how to do that." Rather than what most women would say is, "Get out. Are you insane?" But she said, "Well, let's figure out how to do that." And she did.
She did it on Christmas Eve, 1990, in her parents' home after a family holiday celebration. Karla spiked Tammy's eggnog with sleeping pills called Halcyon and used halothane, an anesthetic used in animal surgery stolen from the veterinary clinic where Karla worked.
That would guarantee that the girl would stay out. But in the process, of course, he got to have sex with this comatose girl, teenage girl. And they made a video of it.
The videotape also showed Karla having sex with her sister. She'd do anything for Paul. It was supposed to be a special Christmas present, but it turned into a nightmare. Tammy choked and died.
Once Tammy was dead, it changed everything. She said that Paul Bernardo said to her, "If you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to tell your family that you killed Tammy Homolka, your sister."
The Canadian authorities ruled it an accident. Ironically, just weeks before, through tips and a police sketch, Paul had been questioned on suspicion of being what was dubbed locally the Scarborough Rapist. He had even given DNA samples to the police, but the DNA results that were supposed to take weeks took 3 critical years. For 3 years, Paul was free to stalk his prey. Since 1987, the year he met Karla, Paul Bernardo committed an estimated 14 rapes. Meanwhile, Karla, knowing his penchant for rape, was planning a wedding present for Paul.
She coerced this young friend into the house, and while he wasn't even there, she put her down in exactly the way she did her sister and called him and said, "I have a wedding present for you, get home."
To protect her identity, authorities call her Jane Doe. She has no memory of the rapes or the fact that she stopped breathing and almost died at the hands of her so-called friend. Paul decided to reciprocate Karla's present. He kidnapped 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffy from her own backyard. She was locked out that night. He took her to his upscale new house near Niagara Falls.
Early in 1991, he rented a house on Bayview Avenue in Port Dalhousie. From the outside, a beautiful couple in a beautiful house, but inside it was a chamber of horrors.
Karla and Paul raped Leslie Mahaffy for 24 hours. It was all on the videotape, but after that, accounts differ.
Paul Bernardo, after he killed Leslie, took her body into the basement, bought some cement, cut up her body with a chainsaw, her limbs from the torso and her head, and then he encased these parts in blocks of cement. And then he took these blocks out to Lake Gibson and dumped them in the water there.
There's no question that he had been raping people prior to this point, but they're all alive. And you say, gee, no one died until they moved in together. Who was the angel of death here?
Their fairytale wedding took place 2 weeks later, on June 29, 1991. The bride in a voluminous white dress, the husband in tails. A ride in a Cinderella coach from the service to the reception, with veal stuffed pheasant and champagne for 100 people in the picturesque town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. On that very same day, 20 miles away, police were recovering the dismembered body of Leslie Mahaffy. Then, on April 16, 1992, they went on the hunt again.
Paul and Karla went out in the spring of 1992 to look for a sex slave, to cruise and try and find a teenage girl. And Karla picked out Kristen French.
He kept saying, go through what we're going to do. So I said, well, if we see a girl, we're going to stop. I'm going to ask her for directions. I'm going to try and get her over to the car. So he wanted her right beside him so he could hold the knife to her. And I sat in the back seat, actually more in the middle of the front seats. And I held her hair, and like I held her head down.
Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka held Kristen French captive for 3 days. He would script Kristen French to say, "You're the king of the virgins. All the virgins love you, master."
Kristen French's nude body was found in a ditch, her long hair crudely cut off, savagely beaten and apparently strangled, just yards from Leslie Mahaffy's grave.
It could be argued she actually died from drowning in her own blood. The point being, she was left alone with Kristen French for hours at a time, and he claims that one day he came back after getting Swiss chalet chicken and some movies at the video rental store, and Kristen French was dead.
In an attempt to put the police off the track, Paul and Karla decided to change their last name to Teale, taken from the name of a fictional rapist serial killer played by Kevin Bacon in the 1988 movie Criminal Law. But then Paul made a big mistake. He turned on Karla, beating her with a flashlight. Her injuries were so bad, Karla's parents took her to the hospital, and that was the beginning of the end. On February 17, 1993, Paul Bernardo was arrested as the Scarborough rapist. The DNA results had finally come back. He was their rapist, but the Niagara police couldn't pin the murders on Paul. They didn't have enough evidence. They hadn't found the videotapes yet. And that was good news for Karla.
She testifies against her husband. She gets a 12-year sentence for 2 counts of manslaughter. Period.
Paul Bernardo pled not guilty to the murders. He has always maintained it was Karla who killed Leslie Mahaffy, Kristen French, and her sister Tammy. The police and prosecutors portrayed Karla as a battered woman suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder.
I think that whoever got involved with him at that point in time, if they were young enough and pliable enough, could have been squeezed like putty and turned into his acolyte.
The Crown was persuaded by that view that she was a victim of battered wife syndrome. I think they were all tricked.
Paul Bernardo Teale was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder after Karla testified against him. He is serving 2 life sentences.
The only way that Paul Bernardo will get out of the federal penitentiary is in a pine box.
But Karla Homolka Teale is being released from Joliet Prison outside of Montreal on July 5th of this year. Joliet Prison's nickname is Camp Fed. Karla Homolka wrote to Stephen Williams about her time in prison. This summer, we suntanned all the time. I think it's very ironic. People want me in Max, so my life will be hard, but really it isn't. We can spend the day sleeping, suntanning, or doing whatever we want all day, every day. Although the Canadian National Parole Board recently concluded Karla is unremorseful, dangerous, and likely to commit murder again, she will be set free from Joliet, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it.
The parole board no longer has any say. She's not on parole when she's released. She's served her time. She can do anything she wants.
But it seems there are some people who can't wait till she gets out.
I think it's quite likely that Karla Homolka is going to be harmed, is going to be very seriously harmed. There's already a Karla death pool that on the internet. It shows you the degree of hatred that is out there for Karla Homolka.
My concern is that when she gets out, that she's going to hook up with another type of Paul Bernardo personality.
According to Linda Verino, who was Karla's cellmate at Joliet Prison, that is a distinct possibility. Linda told A Current Affair Karla continues to have violent sexual habits and even has a new boyfriend named Paul, the same as her ex. And this Paul was jailed for murdering his wife.
We from friends. They wanted to marry together, and she's in love with him. You just finish with the Paul, and you go back with the Paul. Maybe you like to be with the killer.
I suspect that all we're going to be doing is setting our watches before the next victim.
Karla Homolka will not be able to fade away into a black hole and disappear forever. That will not happen.
Wow. Canadian authorities announced yesterday that they would impose restrictions on Karla when she gets out, but they didn't specify what. All right, catch your breath. We'll be back with more in a moment.
It was